Evidential breath test, a smarter future. That's what we're looking forward to, and that's what we'd like to discuss today. So very pleased to be taking part in this RSGD festival and also part of the National Road Safety Week. So next slide, please, Ed. So where do we start from? Well, as I'm sure most of you are aware, drink driving is a major killer. We seem to be moving through the slides rather rapidly. Okay. So 13% of road deaths are still involving drink driving. There has been a long-term decline between basically the sort of current sets of figures started in 1980. There were figures before that, but they're not on a comparable basis. So actually 79 was the first set of reliable data. And tracing that through to 2018, there's been a substantial decline. However, as you can see from, well, next slide, please, Ed. Right, indeed, and this slide here showing the last 10 years, it has been flat, as with most, as other types of casualties and fatalities in the UK and in other countries. So we haven't made any progress for 10 years. And actually that's against the trend, because generally drink driving casualties reduce faster than the overall trend. So what I just point out is that these figures here are from detailed studies based on coroners' courts reports, etc. They are slightly different to the figures you'll see in the Stats 19 reports in reported road casualties Great Britain. They show a higher number because it is more reliable and they detect more cases when it's done on more detailed investigation. So there's a job to do. There's a job to do. Next slide, please, Ed. So we've had over 50 years now, over 50 years of drink drive laws and enforcement. So the system in the UK is based on a set of legal limits enforced by the police, quite severe, quite high penalties for those who are convicted, rehabilitation courses for some offenders, and the additional high-risk offender scheme. Next slide, please. So winding forward a bit, obviously we now have more modern breath test equipment. But what I'm sure this audience here will know, but what many people do not realise is that the roadside breath tests are screeners and they are not evidential, even though they are highly accurate and in most cases confirmed by the evidential machine subsequently. They are not adequate to stand up in court. So next slide, please. Just having a look at what's happened in terms of drink drive enforcement. It reached a peak in 2009, and I'm afraid since then, as with much of roads policing, it has been declining. We are hoping that trend will be reversed in the near future, and we're very keen to see the government respond to the HMIC report into roads policing, very critical report into roads policing, and also their own call for evidence. Next slide, please. And we could just quickly question how effective the regime is, as much as we are apprehending people. There is still a serious issue of reoffending. 17% of drink drive offences and 44% of drug drive offences were committed by a previous offender. So, I'm not going to go into that now, but there are certainly questions about, even once people are apprehended, detected, whether we are keeping them off the roads in the way that they should be. Next slide, please. But back to testing. So I showed a slide of the roadside screeners. The evidential bit is in the police station, where people will blow into a machine. As I say, normally at the police station. In some cases, it may be a blood test, particularly where the driver is in hospital and unable to attend the police station. You might know that, I think it's now 5 years ago, the government removed the so-called statutory right to a blood test, to demand a blood test and refuse to take a breath test. There was no scientific reason for that, and that has improved the situation. Having said that, next slide, please. Oh, actually, can you go back one, please, Ed? Thank you. Okay, we'll stick with this one for now. Having said that, there are problems with the existing system. Next slide, please. Yeah. So the equipment that the police use in the police stations and elsewhere has to undergo type approval by the Home Office. Home Office sets the standards. This avoids legal challenges in courts, so-called loophole lawyers, which charge large amounts to try and allegedly get their clients off. Some of the clients you've just seen in previous slides. However, although the UK type approval system is seen as very good in many ways, it is onerous, it is time-consuming, it is expensive, and there are some questions which PACTS have been raising as to whether it actually delivers what we need in terms of road safety. But that's a slightly separate issue, but it's just worth bearing in mind that is the hurdle which manufacturers have to overcome in order to get their equipment into use with the police and so forth. Next slide, please. So, evidential breath testing. Where are we? What's happened? So, powers were introduced over 10 years ago, following an amendment by Viscount Simon, which enabled the police to undertake so-called roadside breath testing, evidential roadside breath testing. I'm sorry, I haven't put the ACT in there, but I can do that. But 10 years on, there is no equipment for the police to buy and use. None has passed Home Office type approval standard, which is at least disappointing, shall we say. And PACTS has been reminding the Department of Transport and the Home Office of that regularly for some years, and doing their best to embarrass them. More seriously, or at least even more serious concern to the Department of Transport and the police too, is that in the last few years, the number of evidential machines in police stations has been declining, sometimes because police stations have closed. The machines are aging and failing, and you can't buy new ones. And so that means that if an officer at the side stops the driver tests positive by the screener, then it may be more difficult to take them back to a police station within a reasonable period of time and get the evidential sample taken. So there is a strong likelihood that in some cases people are getting off. So because PACTS made a lot of noise, and because the Department of Transport and I would say the Home Office and the police are concerned, they set up something called the MEBT competition, the Mobile Evidential Breath Test Instruments competition. And perhaps it's not fair to say it was established by PACTS. It was established by DFT, and PACTS was asked to run it. Next slide, please. So I want to really emphasize that PACTS is not running the type approval process. That is still very much the responsibility of the Home Office and their agencies, notably what is now DSTL, which is Defence Services and Technology Limited, down in Porton Down. But the purpose of the competition was to stimulate innovation, competition, and progress towards achieving type approval for evidential breath test machines against the new standard, which is substantially higher and more demanding than the standard for the existing machines. And the Department of Transport has made £350,000 grant available, not to PACTS, I hasten to add, not at all, but for awarding over 3 stages to companies that come forward. We were asked, as I say, to run the competition. That's what we're doing. And we established a steering group, including Department of Transport, Home Office, what was CAST, now DSTL, Forensic Science, the police, and other experts. Next slide, please. So the competition was launched in 2018. We have completed 2 stages. The first stage, companies were invited to submit plans to demonstrate that they had some sort of viable plan to achieve type approval within a certain period of time. And on the basis of those submissions, 2 awards were made to Lion Laboratories and to Intox. Roll on a year, and at stage 2, we asked companies to let us know how the progress they're making towards type approval, and were they likely to achieve that in the near future. And I should hasten to say that PACTS did not make the judgment on this, because we are not the experts, but with our steering panel of experts, we did make judgment, and 2 awards were made towards Lion and Medax. We're now at stage 3 award stage. It was extended because of the difficulties that companies and testing laboratories were having due to COVID. We had hoped to tie it up this year, but we intend to make an announcement towards the start of 2022. There are further details on our website, but it's essentially fairly simple, really. There's a limited number of companies that are in the game. I think at the outset there was some hope or the possibility that maybe some new entrants would come along, and there were some new companies that came along and expressed interest with some quite innovative ideas, but they were not likely to fit in with the existing type approval requirements. So they dropped away. Next slide, please. So what's the way ahead? Well, we are now fairly hopeful that 1 or more devices is likely to achieve type approval in 2022. And I'm pleased to say that one of those companies is in the audience today, and if they wish to, they're very welcome to comment. And I think on that basis that devices should be available for the police to buy and use later in the year. They will replace or supplement existing breath test machines in police stations. They will meet the new higher standards. It will be a world-leading level of accuracy and a product that they can be very proud of and market anywhere. I mean, one of the issues is, of course, that other countries do have evidential breath test machines, but they do not come up to a standard, or the same standard anyway, that the Home Office has set for the UK. And the other advantage is that these new machines, they will be mobile to the extent that they can be moved without decommissioning and then recommissioning, which is the requirement of the current machine. So even if the police officer decides he wants to move it, or she wants to move it from one side of the office to the other, that currently, as I understand it, is not feasible with the current machines. These new ones, that should be much more flexible, and they could potentially be taken to other police stations or to hospitals or other locations. Next slide, please. However, I explained MEBT, mobile evidential breath test instruments. They will be mobile, but we now, on advice from the police, think that they will not be roadside. We're now talking about them as next generation breath tests. There are 2 particular issues with taking breath test evidence at the roadside. One is all the requirements around taking evidence at the roadside, and that is basically much easier and more defensible in a custody suite. Secondly, the police have a duty of care to the public, and there are concerns that may be difficult to meet that duty of care in a roadside situation. So exactly how the new devices will be deployed by the police, I'm open to comment from people on this session. Francis, no doubt, will have a bit of say more about that. And I've just chucked in there reform of the type approval system. PACTS would like to see if we can make the system more efficient and effective to bring forward more equipment more quickly. But as I say, I'm hoping we're now on the last lap of Evidential, of the new generation of breath testers. Next slide, please. So if you want more information, PACTS will publish 5 reports on alcohol policing and also on alcohol interlocks and one on drug driving. So you're very welcome to look at those on our website if they are of use to you. Otherwise, that's all from me, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us and look forward to your comments.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. I think we recovered from a stuttering start there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about
that. That's all right. No problem at all. Let's just change the attendees view to gallery. And I'll promote Francis Malin up to panelist ready for a quick question and answer session. We have a couple of questions in the chat already, so once I've just sorted that, I will revert to those. So I'll just fire the first question while we wait for Francis to rejoin as a panelist. The question is, how many companies entered the competition?
We had, if you like, different numbers of companies at different stages. There were, I would say, 4 main companies that engaged. There were one completely new entrant, or if you like, a complete startup. No, two startups, and one other player, 2 other players. Yeah, so 2 other players which were interested, serious, but probably a bit peripheral. You know, the amount of money, investment, expertise, and so forth is not insignificant. So I think 8 is my total answer to that.
Yeah. Hi, Francis. How are you? I just thought, Dave, you have to introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah, I'm Francis Malin. I work for Nottinghamshire Police. I'm a retired police officer, police staff now. So I look after the drink and drug drive stuff for our force, but I'm also the chair of the MGDD form editing group, which produce the procedural forms that police officers throughout England and Wales, and also in Northern Ireland with a bit of adaptation use. So we're currently doing new forms to cater for using an evidential breath test anywhere if that does come in. And I was also part of David's PACTS panel.
Excellent, thank you very much. I'll just read a quick comment out that we've had, just scroll back up, from Yvonne Taylor, who says, it would be good if we were on the last lap of this. It's been ongoing for such a long time. And then we've got a couple more questions, which I'll fire in with the first one. Why are the next generation not going to be MEBD?
Well, I gave a couple of quick explanations there, but Francis, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, as David said, the legislation was changed some years ago to allow evidential breath testing to be required anywhere. And that's fine. I mean, that's sort of fit for purpose. But the problem is, from the police point of view, what do you do with somebody once they've provided an evidential breath test at the roadside? And the police powers to deal with that are lacking, really. And there's great concern as to how we do with somebody who refuses to cooperate and insists on walking off along the side of a main road whilst intoxicated. How do you remove their car? There's all sorts of issues around that duty of care, and that's really the big concern. Using it at hospital, yeah, that should be okay, because you know it's only a bolt onto the existing procedure down at a hospital with blood and urine, so that should be all right, and obviously in the police station be all right. But roadside, yeah, there were great concerns as to how it would do. I know it's been looked at by government, and it may need some legislation changes to enable that to happen.
Excellent. David, is there anything you got to add on that before I pick up?
Well, I suppose we have explored the idea of, you know, booze buses, if you like, as some countries have, with random breath testing, but that involves a whole suite, or well, not suite, a number of officers and equipment and so forth, would require a lot more resource apart from any sort of legal issues. So it's not as simple as we perhaps first thought.
And I think the other issue will be they're going to be expensive. I think these pieces of equipment, whichever you know, manufacturer supplier you get them from, and there ain't going to be that many of them out there to take out, to be honest.
Excellent, thanks both. We've got a question that's come in from Michael McDonnell. He says, crystal ball gazing, what's your prediction on them going live?
Go on, Francis, you want to go first?
Oh, well, yes, if only I knew the answer. I mean, I think, as you said, David, it's potentially possible towards the end of 2022. But the things have been said so many times over the years. It'll be next year, it'll be next year. But certainly, from what we've heard, I think that's a better guesstimate than it has been in the past.
Yeah. We have Steve Pope from Intox in the attendees. I don't know if you want to put Steve on the spot, but if he doesn't want to, then he doesn't need to say anything. But yeah, that is the considered view of the steering panel, and we're hopeful. I think we do feel that the testing and the oh, Steve's got his hand up. There we go. Give us some good news, Steve.
Steve, you're able to speak, so if you unmute yourself, we should all be able to hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Pope here from Intoximeters. Now, first of all, just apologise about the sound. I'm actually sat in my car at fuel services on the M6 due to the late invite, but no, it was a great presentation. I'd just like to add something. Obviously, I know we're talking about mobile evidentials. The Home Office and DSTL actually came out about 4 weeks ago with an amendment to the different structures of the instrument and the use of the instrument, in that in the original type approval, it gave reference to a fixed evidential, so a straight replacement for the current instruments, and also a mobile evidential to be used outdoors, on the street, by the side of the road. Then guidance were updated recently to also include what they're now classing as a transportable instrument. So an instrument that can be moved around from location to location, and it can be used in a vehicle as well if required. So especially for some of the customers, I'm not sure if anybody's on from Police Scotland, but I know from speaking to them, on a lot of the outlying islands, they have major issues where on the main islands, they will have an evidential breath alcohol instrument, but on one of the outlying islands, it's basically free rein for drink driving, and they've got no way of testing them. So being able to offer a transportable instrument, one that can be packed up, taken to a different location, set up, and evidential breath testing taking place, is a real benefit to them. Okay, right. People asked about cost. Will they be affordable? And, you know, we understand, yes, cost and budgets are a big issue. Now, just something from our side, something that we've looked into previously, is possibly doing instruments on loan. So they can be loaned or a hire purchase, so that the cost of the instruments can be spread over a number of years. Now, that is something that we would like to introduce, but then that comes down to the DFT and Blue Light in the way that they actually run their tender and what is actually asked for in their tender documents.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve.
Okay.
You touched on cost, which was a question we've also had in, will they be affordable? I don't know if David or Francis, if there's anything you want to add on that before we move on to the next question.
Well, we don't actually know yet, do we? What the cost is going to be? We've had some hints from one supplier, and yeah, I mean they're going to be expensive, but probably in real terms, roughly around the price that we all paid 20 odd years ago for the current generation devices. But certainly, if they are at that sort of cost, yes, it would be affordable to replace like for like in the stations. But I don't think there would be that many spare units to go mobile.
No, I think in the early stages, and PACTS is probably as guilty as anyone here, we imagined something, you know, that could almost go in every police car or every Rose police car, possibly, you know, a bit like the drug wipes at the moment. You know, something's pretty small. They're obviously, well, there are different models. We'll see what comes on the market, but some are lighter and more easily portable than others. But they're not just something to slip in your pocket. Whereas the existing screeners are small, cheap to use. You know, they're a different animal altogether.
Excellent. Thanks very much, David. We've got one more question in the chat, which I'll just read through. If anybody else has got any questions, obviously type away or raise your hand if you want to come and join the discussion. But the question is from Emma Kelly, and it reads, if there are not going to be that many machines in police stations because they're cost prohibitive, how are we going to enhance the deterrent effect and ensure that we dissuade people from drink driving?
Well, I mean, I would certainly hope that there is at least as many as there are at the moment, if not more. And, you know, PACTS will be campaigning to try and persuade the police to buy them. And maybe, I mean, the Department of Transport, having put 350,000 into this competition, I think they're going to want to make sure that once these things do get type approval, they are taken up. We're waiting for the outcome of the roads policing call for evidence, the government's call for evidence, and what are they going to do on roads policing? And we're arguing, as did HMIC FRS, that roads policing should become a strategic priority, a national strategic priority for the police. You know, set out at the Home Office, not something that they could pick and choose. So I think hopefully the context will be right, and you know, in part of the new road safety framework strategy, whatever the government calls it, which we expect to see early next year, then, you know, roads policing should be a fundamental part of that. And obviously we've already got the Scottish framework. You know, Michael's on the call, and certainly you know, roads policing, drink driving is an important part of that. It's actually also just worth saying, I think, that Scotland reduced the drink drive. Sorry, Scotland did reduce the drink drive limit. Northern Ireland has also passed legislation to reduce the drink drive limit, with an even lower level for novice drivers and professional drivers. I think they are waiting for this new generation of equipment to come in order for them to be able to implement their new limits. So there's a number of advantages that this new stuff should have.
Excellent, thanks. And we do have another question that's come in from Paul Leatherbarrow. He says, we tend to see a rise in drink driving arrests when there is a big tournament, but with the 2022 World Cup starting in November and concluding in December, which obviously coincides with the Christmas period, do you think it may be a good opportunity to have the new devices fit for purpose by then? It would be a great publicity, hopefully positive publicity, and possibly a deterrent in people drink driving.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, it is, as Emma Kelly and people like that know, it's about communicating the deterrent message to potential drink drivers, letting them know that the police are out there, and that if they, you know, I think one of the advantages of the new equipment is that it might appear, you know, not only be more effective, but actually get the message across that there's a new, more effective regime. So hopefully, absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. I think that covers all the questions we've had at the moment. I'll give it a few more seconds if anybody else wants to. We've got a raised hand from Nick Rawlings. Nick, I'll allow you to talk. You should be able to talk now if you want to ask your question.
Hi, yes, yeah, thanks. Hello, David.
Hi, Nick.
Hello, Francis. Just wanted to come back on this issue of them not being able to be used at the roadside. It just seems to me to be a fundamental point that I thought, my understanding was that the equipment was designed specifically for that, and now you're saying it's not going to be the case. So is that a big problem, do you think?
Well, I think it's disappointing, but I think it's two things. One is these are not super lightweight, super cheap machines, so they can't be scattered around to every roads, you know, patrol car. And secondly, there's, as Francis explained, the issues around taking evidence to the roadside and the duty of care. And I think that I don't know whether that's something that's become more onerous, or whether it's something just wasn't explored in the early days when we thought these would be roadside evidential. But it's not to say that the system won't work.
I guess it's what's behind my question. Was it thought about at the early stage or not? Was it known at the outset that was going to be the case? Has this occurred? Has this cropped up since the competition?
Well, legislation was pushed through by Viscount Simon, who sadly passed away last year. But he was very proud of that amendment, but it was actually an amendment that was passed without having worked out all the technicalities. But I'm not clear whether the conditions have become more onerous, since the legislation was passed.
I would say the culture has changed, and police are more aware of their duty of care, possibly. Bearing in mind how long the legislation's been in. I mean, the legislation is actually, the amendment has been amended once, and that was about 5 years ago. So, but as David says, it's I don't think how you deal with somebody after getting a positive test at the roadside on an evidential was particularly thought about. It was just thought this goal of a roadside evidential would be great, but the legislation hasn't kept up with it. And that's the issue at the minute. So yeah, initially I think it will just be police station replacement and possibly going to hospital. I mean, something which forces can look at, which I only know of Avon and Somerset do this. They have actually put the existing evidentials back in a couple of more rural stations, which are like an hour's drive away from the custody centre, and they do take people into these police stations, which are not a custody centre, get evidential breath reading off them much sooner, because that is a problem. We can have people driving for an hour or so sometimes to get somebody on an evidential. So there is another way of looking at it. So that's what Avon and Somerset do.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Nick, anything you want to come back on that point, or are you all satisfied?
I think they've answered the question as best they can, really. So that's fine. Thank you very much indeed for the answers. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, as it stands, we don't have any more questions that we have unanswered. So I don't know if David or Francis, if there's anything you want to say before we conclude the session.
Thanks everybody for joining and for these really interesting questions and information. And we hope to be able to announce something more in the new year. And yeah, hopefully in a year's time, your festival 2022 will be able to say, here they are, here, look at one, buy one.
Francis?
No, I think David said it really. It will be good. I mean, with the number of cases, because of course they can be used with all the evidential types, transport types, because there's rail with the same limits as road, and we've got shipping at 25 and obviously aviation at 9, plus what Scotland and Northern Ireland do. So yes, it will enable evidential breath to be taken in those scenarios as well. So there is that advancement.
Excellent. Well, thank you to you both for the Q&A session, and thanks, David, for delivering the presentation. I think we recovered from a slightly rocky start. And I will add, obviously, we've recorded the presentation, which I will edit and upload to the festival website, hopefully the next 24 hours, maybe sooner. So yeah, so all left for me really to say is thank you as well for attending, particularly those of you who have joined in the conversation. And if you've got any feedback or questions, you've all got my email, so just let me know. So thanks everybody, and cheers again.